Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. I am so glad to be back. Many of you have been asking, for those of you who missed the Monday live stream, the 1 minute live stream, I'll give you the sort of short summary. And first of all, let me just say, could not possibly be more grateful to all of you. The comments I've gotten and the kindness, I really, really appreciated it. Monday was a very strange day. It was about 6:40 and I was getting ready to go on the live stream, and we had a special guest, Lori Hellis. And for many of you who were excited about the case, I mean, I've been talking about the case for a month, right? I've been telling you how great it is, how fascinating, how you don't want to miss it. And then, like, where's Lee, right? Where is she? So about 6:40, I'm getting ready to go live at 7. My husband had a seizure. That was something brand new that had never happened before. And so we called the paramedics. Paramedics are here. They're loading him up. I'm getting him ready, packing a bag, getting his insurance card. And it's 7 o'clock. I'm like, oh no, because y'all are waiting. My guest, Lori Hellis, is waiting. So I come running up, tell her, we go live for a minute, say, I'm so sorry, and then got off. And I am so sorry about that. It's been quite the week, but I am delighted to report that my husband is much better and doing well, and they're helping him immensely. So, but I just was absolutely overwhelmed. Lori Hellis could not have been more gracious. And by the way, she's going to be back on with us Tuesday night, which is the first day of trial for this week. They're taking Monday off. And I also want to say thank you to y'all. The comments were so nice for my 1 minute live stream on Monday. And then many of you commented later, and people contacted me on Twitter. Lawyer Lee W is my Twitter. And y'all just could not have been nicer. I'm very, very appreciative. And it has been, I will say this case was absolutely worth the wait. I'm sorry we couldn't do it all week long, every day as I'd hoped, but I will cover all of it tonight in one live stream, and I do not think you will be disappointed. It has been absolutely the wildest case. I have never seen anything like this case, and that includes Murdoch. And you know how interesting I found Murdoch, and we covered that. All of us did find that interesting, and this is even wilder. I've just never seen anything like it. I don't know that I have words. Let's just get into talking about it. I'm going to give you a very short summary of what the opening was, just so you can kind of see what direction everybody's heading. And then I want to take you through the first week's witnesses so you can see what is happening in the case. And so to me, the state's argument was sort of encapsulated with 2 or 3 quotes. The most important was money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about. Lori Vallow Daybell used money, power, and or the promise of those things to get what she wanted. She didn't care what obstacles or people had to be removed to get what she wanted. And by the way, for those of you who are new and just tuning in, this case is the Lori Vallow Daybell case that we're talking about. She is accused of murdering her 7-year-old son, JJ, her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, and of conspiring to murder Tammy Daybell. Tammy was the wife of Chad Daybell. Just 17 days after Tammy's death, Chad and Lori married. And so the state is saying that Lori did whatever she could to get what she wanted, that she didn't care what got in the way. She was willing to remove it to make sure she got what she wanted. And that's their argument. Now, the state also talked about the fact that Chad and Lori rated people as dark or light spirits. And if you were dark, you could evolve into so dark that you became a zombie. And coincidentally, all 3 victims who are the subject of this lawsuit, this murder case against Lori Vallow Daybell, have been designated as dark. The defense is a couple of things. One is that Lori was a great mom. She could never do this. And they said she was, for example, Kay Woodcock, the grandmother of JJ, wanted her to adopt JJ. She was a fantastic mom. This would never be something she would do. Thank you, Dragon Man Sasson. Good to see you. in the chat. So she also had an alibi defense. Her alibi, frankly, with JJ and Tylee is quite weak. Her alibi with Tammy is stronger because she says, I wasn't even in the country. I was in Hawaii at the time that Tammy Daybell was killed. So it wasn't something where, I even could have participated. But the state's answer to that is she's not accused of personally suffocating. Asphyxiation was the cause of death. She's not accused of personally doing that. She's accused of conspiring to murder Tammy Daybell. And that's their argument. The defense also is working on some blame shifting. They'd like to shift the blame to a couple of people, most notably Alex Cox. That's Lori's brother. And then secondly, they would like to shift the blame to Chad. One of the things that was said in the opening statement was that Lori's beliefs changed when she met Chad Daybell, who would then become her husband. At the time, Lori and Chad were both married to other people, but ultimately they married each other. Lori's husband died. She's charged with conspiring to murder him in Arizona. And then, of course, also there was the death of Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's wife. That happened in Idaho. That's part of this particular lawsuit. And Joanne, I appreciate the super sticker. So the defense opening statement said something I was really surprised to hear, and I would like to get your reaction in the chat. I'm really curious about what you think about this. Here's what he said, and then you can just react and tell me what you think. He said that over the past, this is Jim Archibald, and he said over the past 32 years, he had been assigned to 27 murder cases. And this is as close to a quote as I could get. They are difficult cases. I was assigned to this case and I'm paid by the taxpayers. So thank you for paying your taxes. And also said then that being a defense lawyer is a hard job. And 8 years ago, his office was bombed. Now, I am really curious what you think of that. My reaction as an attorney was that it sounded like, well, I'll give you just a second. Go ahead and write your comments because I'm curious. I don't want to taint it. And thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate the super sticker. So I'm giving y'all a second. Nobody's typing anything now. So I'm very curious what you think about that because I was very surprised by that. And I'll just go ahead and talk to you about it. I felt like that sounded like he was distancing himself from his client. And I'm very curious, would that make, if let's say you're a juror and the defense lawyer says, 8 years ago, I was defending one of these cases and my office was bombed. Do you feel threatened in any way? Do you feel like people may come get you if you don't convict this particular defendant? Does it seem like that's the thing you have to do? I'm just curious whether any of you had those thoughts. I was very surprised at those comments. It wasn't what I was expecting. I see someone saying that the defense has been lackluster. There's been very little the defense has had to say, very little. We'll talk about the two arguments I think they made, but it's been very little. And it may simply be because they don't have a lot to say. They don't really have arguments to respond to some of these things. Now, the week started out with Kay Woodcock. She is the grandmother, natural grandmother of JJ Vallow. JJ is one of the children. He was the 7-year-old murdered. And I'm going to go ahead and show you this real quickly. This was the chart I did when Lori Hellis and I explained sort of the whole lawsuit in the video that we did last week. Alex Cox, you'll see Lori in the middle. Everybody in red has died, not necessarily under suspicious circumstances, but each of them died prematurely in a surprise given their age. It wasn't something that was anticipated and they weren't desperately ill, anything like that. The three people, and someone suggested, I haven't had a chance to do it yet, but someone suggested that I mark separately, and I think it's a good idea, the three people who are the subject of this lawsuit: Tylee Ryan, JJ Vallow, and Tammy Daybell. Tylee and JJ are children of Lori's by different marriages. Tammy Daybell was Chad Daybell's wife. So Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow both died in September of 2019. Tammy died the next month, October of 2019. The exact day that Tylee and JJ died is not known, but they are pretty close based on some facts and some evidence that they've been able to introduce at the trial. So there's not an actual known date, but it's fairly clear. So as you can see from this, Charles Vallow was JJ Vallow's father. But now Charles Ryan was actually had adopted JJ along with Lori. Charles was the brother of, this is complicated, I know. Charles was the brother of Kay Woodcock. Kay was the natural grandmother of JJ, and she was delighted, she said, when Charles and Lori decided to adopt him. Kay's son could not care for him, and Charles and Lori had a great stable home. She thought they would be fantastic as parents. Now, Charles Vallow is also dead, and we will talk about that as we go through this because it's part of the case. So JJ's natural grandmother, Kay Woodcock, is the first person to testify, and it was very emotional testimony. She and her husband, Larry, cared for JJ as a child for the first months of his life, and she talked about how great she thought it was when Lori and Charles adopted him. But she said there was an abrupt change for Lori in February and March of 2019, that Lori left for 58 days, and no one had any idea when she would get back. She just left. Now, she did come back, but by June 2019, Charles and Lori were not doing well in their marriage, and Charles planned to divorce Lori. But before he could do that, on July 11th, 2019, Charles was killed. He was killed, and we'll get into exactly what happened, but he was killed by Lori Vallow's brother, Alex, who now also is dead. But he was killed in what Lori and Alex claimed was self-defense. Also, Tylee claimed it was self-defense as well. Kay Woodcock also talked about the disappearance of JJ, that following this period of time when Charles Vallow was killed, that she only had 3 more contacts with JJ, that she wanted to take JJ to the funeral for his father, but Lori wouldn't get back to her. She was never able to arrange that. That she wanted to be able to talk to him on the phone, but someone held the phone and only allowed him to talk for 30, 45 seconds, she said, and then it was gone. And she never really had contact with him again. They've been incredibly close. She had seen JJ repeatedly, but throughout the year, every 3 months or so, when they were close enough, every 6 months at the time the family lived in Hawaii. And so the fact that she couldn't see him was of grave concern to her. So she went to the police and said, I'd like a welfare check on JJ. I'd like to know more about where he is and what the problem is. So the life insurance, and she talked about 2 other really important facts that will be woven in throughout the trial. One is that Charles Vallow changed his life insurance and that Lori did not know about it. So according to Kay, Lori would have thought she was the beneficiary of the $1 million life insurance policy on Charles Vallow. Now, Charles, because he was killed, that got paid out, but Charles had changed the beneficiary to his sister Kay, and so Kay received the $1 million. And Charles told her, I want you to keep this for JJ, to care for him, and I also want you to take half of it and split it among my other 2 sons, but JJ needs to be cared for. So if anything happens to me, that's what I want you to do with the money. But Lori apparently thought she was going to get the life insurance proceeds. Kay also talked about some very damning evidence about searches on Amazon that Lori Vallow did. Apparently, Lori was able to use Charles Vallow's account. And so she was able to look and see that on October 2nd, Kay was able to look and see that on October 2nd, 2019, Lori Vallow was searching for some things that were a little surprising. She was searching for a women's bathing suit. She was searching for men's wedding clothes. She was searching for malachite wedding rings. And all of those things, those searches were taking place 17 days before Tammy Daybell even died. In fact, Chad did wear white clothes at his wedding in Hawaii. Lori did receive a malachite wedding ring. She did wear a women's bathing suit in Hawaii, or need one in Hawaii, but she shouldn't have needed those as of October 2nd, because Tammy Daybell was still married to Chad. She was still alive, and the prosecution is using that as evidence. Thank you to Kay Oakley. I appreciate that. So Brandon Boudreaux was the next witness. And I will tell you, I was very surprised by this. When Lori Hellis and I covered the case, I told her, let's just leave out the Brandon Boudreaux issue, because I feel like it's too complicated. Trying to explain this and add in that, it's just going to put it over the top. Let's simplify. But he was the second witness. So we are all the way into the Brandon Boudreaux matter. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Brandon was married to Lori's niece, whose name is Melanie. There are a lot of Melanies in the case. This is Melanie Boudreaux. And his family, and I mean Melanie and Brandon and their children, were very close to the Vallows, by which I mean Charles, Lori, Tylee, and JJ. The families were very close. Like Lori, his wife, Melanie Boudreaux, had a significant change in about 2018 for her, where she became increasingly religious and secretive about her religion. Both Melanie and Lori accused their husbands of misconduct. Lori accused Charles Vallow of being unfaithful to her, and he says that was utterly untrue. Melanie Boudreaux accused Brandon of being gay. Then, importantly, on October 2nd, 2019, someone shot at Brandon Boudreaux. Now, Brandon Boudreaux is in Arizona at the time. He had just moved. He said only 5 people even knew where he lived. And his Jeep was parked near his driveway. As he's driving home toward his house, a window in the Jeep rolled down, a gun with a silencer pointed out the window, and the top of his driver's side window was hit by a bullet. There was a big mistake that the person made, though, because Brandon was an insurance agent at the time, and he says he recognized the vehicle. He recognized the vehicle as the Jeep that Charles Vallow had bought for Tylee. Now, by now, Charles Vallow is dead and Tylee is missing, but no one knew that yet. Well, everyone knew that Charles had been killed, but no one knew Tylee was missing. So that Jeep and the shooting was the beginning of the end. Now, the defense has argued that this is irrelevant evidence that should not have been brought in. And to be honest, I was very surprised that it was brought in. I did think, wow, this may be an issue on appeal, but it has been woven in so well with the story of the case itself that I suspect it will not end up being a problem on appeal. That would just be my guess. So Brandon knew that Charles Vallow had purchased this Jeep, and he knew the VIN number because he had been the insurance agent who had gotten the insurance for this particular Jeep. At this point, there was an objection from the state, from the defense, saying, we don't think that this should be admitted at all. And there was discussion about that. And the state said, look, this is part of a common scheme and a plan. And also, Melanie Boudreaux and the group would benefit financially if Brandon died, because he had an insurance policy as well. The court said, well, you better show that. And I would say they have fairly strongly done that during the course of the trial, and we're only in the first week. The risk of course, is that the appellate court will say that shouldn't have been brought in, that prejudiced the jury, that created additional facts that might have harmed her, and therefore the case has to be tried again. I think based on what I'm seeing, not so much. The testimony by Brandon Boudreaux ended on a note that no attorney ever wants. It ended with him talking about how he had to drive to Rexburg. Idaho, to identify JJ's body after it was found buried in Chad Daybell's yard. JJ's body, he had to identify from photos. He was crying. It was very emotional testimony. And then they turned over the witness. Brutal for the defense. And they made no headway. The next witness was from the Rexburg, Idaho Police Department, Detective Hermosillo, and I'm sure I said that wrong, but he was on the stand for 2 days, across 2 days, not for a full 2 days. He had all kinds of important facts that he talked about. Let me make sure. Yes, okay. So on November 1st, and this is where they sort of wove the story in, they were told that a Jeep was in Rexburg and it might have been involved with an attempted homicide down in Arizona. So on November 4th, the police in Idaho seize the Jeep, the very Jeep that was given to Tylee and that Brandon says was being driven when he was shot at. Now, on November 18th, the Arizona police come to Rexburg to see this Jeep, and they mention JJ and Tylee. This was the first, according to Detective Hermosillo, that this was the first time that there had been any word in Rexburg about the kids. The police didn't know about this issue. The grandmother was concerned, they were told, and so the Arizona police said, we're going to go back and look for JJ in Arizona because we've been asked for that. And I want to say thanks to Patricia Perdomo. I appreciate that. So they go back, and a week later, the Gilbert, Arizona police call and say, we haven't been able to find JJ here in Arizona, and the grandmother really wants a welfare check. Could you go make one? And you can see where each of these steps takes the police into the story. They begin to learn what is wrong that JJ, and they're about to learn that JJ and Tylee are missing. So on November 26th, the Rexburg police go out for a welfare check, and they're going to make a check to see, is JJ okay? Put some eyes on him, make sure he's alive, doing fine. They go out and discover Alex Cox, Lori's brother, and Chad unloading a truck. They talk to Alex, and Alex says that JJ is with Kay Woodcock in Louisiana. Now, they can pretty much tell that is not very likely because Kay is the one who asked for the welfare check. If she had JJ, she wouldn't have asked for that. Alex also claims not to have his own sister's cell phone number. They then talk to Chad, and Chad says he barely knows Lori, has only met her a couple of times. Well, the police know better. They, in fact, know that Chad and Lori are married by now. So, again, that doesn't seem very likely. Eventually, Chad does turn over the number and says, oh, I thought you were accusing me of something. So the police also say they then get to talk to Lori. We know what happens in that because there's body cam. So we were able to see the actual discussion with Lori. And Lori tells the police that JJ is with her friend in Arizona, with her friend Melanie Gibb. She even very specific, saying if you don't catch them at home, it's because they went to a movie. And not just that, they went to Frozen. They went to see the movie Frozen because JJ really wanted to see that. That is the point at which things begin to unravel because Melanie Gibb, although she at first says she did have JJ, says JJ is not with her. She does not have JJ. And so the whole story that Lori and Chad have been telling begins to unravel at that stage. On November 27th, the very next day, the police go out with a search warrant this time. They break down the door of Lori's apartment and search it and find some really surprising things. They find what looks like a pretty lived-in house. There are dishes in the sink. There's food in the pantry. But bizarrely, in the closet, there are hangers and no clothes at all. Everything gone. Alex Cox's closet and his place was bare, they said, but his closet had white hazmat suits and a camo suit. And then in Lori's garage were silencers and gun magazines, ammunition, army-type knives, rifles, and strangely, a Halloween mask, duct tape, and rope. They also found a rental agreement for a storage unit. We haven't heard much about that yet, but we know that it had the kids' stuff in it. Basically everything of the kids had been removed and was now in the storage unit because the police checked that next. Lori Vallow, he pointed out, never called the police about her missing kids. It took other people worrying about them for the police to get alerted to the fact that they were even missing. September 8th, he said, was the last known proof of life for Tylee Ryan. And September 22nd was the last known proof of life for JJ. And by proof of life, just mean where somebody laid eyes on them or they were pictured and there was evidence that they were alive on that day. Now, and this is not quite a year later, but almost, on June 9th, the police executed a search warrant at Chad Vallow's home. Specifically, they were looking in the yard this time. Chad called his lawyer and then sat in his car and watched. And they said he kept looking over his shoulder at this one spot where, in fact, they found a body. They found two bodies, Tylee and JJ, both buried in different places in the yard. When they found that body, the detective said Chad Daybell drove off at a high rate of speed and they pursued him, took him into custody. Now, there were horrendous details on finding the bodies of Tylee and JJ, which I am not going to cover other than those you have to know in order to understand the arguments of the case. So I'm not going to go into the detail that was horrendous and that was covered. JJ was found under 3 large white rocks and wood paneling. He was wrapped in white plastic around his head, a black plastic bag. He was wearing his red pajamas and he was wrapped in duct tape. I have to tell you the duct tape part because it's critical to understanding something that's said later in the case. Tylee's remains had been burned in the fire pit there and then were found under a blue tarp. The way they were buried is important because Chad's kids have argued that the fact that he himself had been a grave digger means he would never have buried them in this haphazard, not all that deep a grave way. But in fact, there were a fair amount of measures taken to seal the bodies and probably to prevent anyone from finding them. The cross-examination, and this is the first time I've even mentioned it, was it was not very effective. I'll put it that way. He admitted on cross that he didn't know for sure Lori owned the guns that were in her garage. Maybe someone else bought a bunch of guns and stored them in Lori's garage. He also said Lori was in Hawaii when Tammy died. That is the one fact they've gotten out over and over again. Lori was not present when Tammy died. And that's apparently undisputed, but it's also not what the state is arguing. So it's also not really relevant. He also said that the paneling and boards found over JJ's body, while they were similar, the defense had to admit, to ones found in Chad's garage, they weren't able to find the identical matching boards. We then moved to Lieutenant Jared Wilmore of the Madison County Sheriff's Office. This testimony was pretty damning for Chad Daybell for when his trial comes up. He's being tried separately from Lori Vallow Daybell. This is less damning, frankly, for Lori, I felt like. There was a call from Chad to Lori in jail. This is while the police are searching the property. They are about to find the bodies. And Chad calls Lori, and the prosecution says this shows Chad and Lori knew the jig was up. And for sure, it does show that, I think, about Chad. Chad says, they're searching the property, so Mark Means will be talking to you. That's the attorney. So searching the property and the attorney will talk to you suggests Chad had some knowledge of what they were going to find. It's a little more ambiguous for Lori, I thought, because of the fact that she says, what, are they in the house? And he says, no, they're on the property. And she says, are they seizing stuff? Again, talking about something that would be in the house, I presume. I doubt you'd seize a swing set or a fire pit. And Chad says, no, they are searching. She then says, what can I do for you? And he says, pray and call our attorney. So I can definitely see where it's very problematic for Chad. It's just less so for Lori because it's not totally clear what she knows about the burial in the yard. It certainly shows that the two of them were aware that there were problems and that there were things that could be found. Lieutenant Joe Powell testified next. He was from the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, and it really does show how these offices were working together because there were a lot of different ones involved. He actually had been charged with surveillance for Chad and Lori, and Tammy had died on October 19th. He was surveilling Chad and Lori while they were walking around on November 1st. This is just 12 days later, and he said they walked into Hobby Lobby holding hands just 12 days after Tammy Daybell died. Lori's best friend, Melanie Gibb, testified next. And there were two witnesses who were absolutely the pivotal witnesses. One was Lori's best friend, Melanie Gibb, and the other was Zulema Pastenes, who was Lori's friend and also Alex Cox's wife, although for only 2 weeks. So Lori's best friend, Melanie Gibb, talked about Chad and Lori's relationship. And she talked about a number of things, and I'll go through each of them. Chad and Lori's relationship was one of the key ones. Chad and Lori had met at a conference, and there was an instant attraction, she said. Lori already believed in multiple lives. One of the questions I've had throughout this is I've wondered which parts were Lori and which parts were Chad. Did Chad convince her of these things, or did Lori convince Chad, or was it mutual? And she said Lori already believed in multiple lives, which they called multiple probations. And Lori became convinced, because Chad said so, that she and Chad had been married in another life, that Lori had kept a separate cell phone just to talk to Chad and communicated with him multiple times a day while her husband was still alive. She said Lori said that she and Chad were intimate, and that was according to God's will because they had been married before in multiple lives and they had a mission together. Now, Lori also said she had been married to the prophet Moroni from the Book of Mormon. And even though they were married to other people at the time, Chad was married to Tammy, Lori was married to Charles, even though that was true at the time, Chad and Lori went to the temple and had a sealing ceremony. A sealing ceremony is, as I understand it, where two people are married for all time in the Mormon or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints church. They weren't sealed in an official way by the church because, of course, they couldn't be. But their relationship, they claimed, was sealed by Moroni and Jesus Christ himself, not in a sealing room, but in a waiting room, I assume, because they could not get into a sealing room because this was not officially sanctioned in any way by the church. Melanie Gibb also talked about Chad and Lori's beliefs, which became stranger and stranger as Zulema and as Melanie discussed it. Lori believed that she and Chad would be leading the 144,000 who would be here at the end of time during the return of Jesus Christ to earth. They also believed in a light and dark scale. I'll just kind of go through some of these beliefs so you can understand some of the rest of the testimony. A light and dark scale. Now, dark meant you were working under a contract with Satan, and you could be really dark or sort of just a little bit dark or not at all dark on that scale. And the same was true for light. You could be a level 1 light, and that means you were just barely light, or you could be a level 6 light, and there were only 2 or 3 people who reached that stage. So you could be ranked 1 through 6 on that level. They also did something called castings, where they would pray to get an evil spirit out of someone. And they talked about zombies because they had to believe that if someone was possessed, they could be taken over by the evil spirit and become a zombie, so that the real person wasn't in them anymore. They were now just the evil spirit occupying the body of the person. They also talked about vibrations, meaning your level of spirituality. The higher the vibrations, the closer you were to being translated. And according to Melanie, Lori felt like she didn't need to eat because she was at a high level of vibration. And I should say, and because people mentioned this in the chat last time, and this is certainly true, these are not mainstream beliefs of their church, although they claim to be members of the church at the time. And now Chad Daybell has been excommunicated, as I understand it, because he declared he was a prophet. So I want to make that clear because obviously people have the right to know about that. So how did this belief system then affect all of the people around Lori and Chad? And let's go through the people we know something about, whether they're alive or there have been attempts on their life. Brandon Boudreaux, let's start with him. He was the second person to testify. As you may remember, he's the husband of Melanie Boudreaux, who is Lori's niece. According to Melanie, Lori believed that Brandon Boudreaux was a very high dark, used to be part of Hitler's group, extremely dark. And of course, someone shot at him and attempted to kill him. Charles Vallow now was Lori Vallow's husband when she first met Chad. In January of 2019, Melanie said Lori learned that her husband, Charles Vallow, had been taken over by an evil spirit and was dark. And she found out because Chad told her about that Charles Vallow, her husband, was dark. Lori said she had a dream where Charles was in a car accident in Texas, but then he didn't. And Lori said, well, Satan interfered with that plan. They had several castings to try to cast out Charles's evil spirit, but Charles was still alive. And the constant statement was, well, okay, a new evil spirit has entered him. So Lori and her friends cast out Ned and Garrett and Hiplos, all of whom were evil spirits that, according to Lori and Chad, entered Charles Vallow. Finally, Charles Vallow was killed in July of 2019, as we mentioned. The story was this, that Lori had asked her brother Alex to come over and protect her as Charles Vallow was going to come by and she was afraid of him. Tylee, they get into a big fight and it was because Lori took Chad's phone away. Sorry, I said Chad. Lori took Charles's phone away. They get into a fight and Tylee comes out with a baseball bat to protect everybody. Charles Vallow takes the baseball bat away from Tylee. There was a statement from Lori and from Alex that Chad, I'm going to get my names mixed up. I saw somebody say that this is more than, some novels would have. Absolutely true. A Tolstoy novel, I think was the comment. Yes, more names, more people than a Tolstoy novel. So according to their story, Charles Vallow actually hit Alex on the back of the head, and then Alex shot him. Alex killed him. Now, Alex claimed after calling 911 that he had tried CPR and so forth, but we're going to hear a little more about whether he really did try CPR. Now, Alex was never prosecuted for that, and he is now dead himself. Lori, however, is being prosecuted for this as a murder. There was conflicting testimony that I thought made kind of a problem here for the prosecution. I mean, it's not a huge problem, but I did think it made a bit of a problem. Now, the prosecution says Charles Vallow had $1 million policy, and Kay Woodcock says it was a big surprise to Lori to learn that I had been named the beneficiary and she was going to get nothing from it. But according to Melanie Gibb, Lori knew that the money was going to go to Kay Woodcock, that it was already known to Lori that she didn't think she was going to get the money. But I think that that's a small matter because there was more than one person who testified Lori did not know. And there was also a text message from Lori that sort of insinuated the same thing. And we'll get to that as well. Now, how did this affect Tylee, this set of beliefs? Well, Chad told Lori that Tylee had become a zombie all the way back when she was 12 or 13 years old. But they just didn't know it until she turned 16 or was 16. And as you know, Tylee was found dead and burned. Her body was burned. JJ at one point was and I'll sort of go through a set of things with JJ. JJ at one point was very upset while Melanie Gibb was present, and Chad took him upstairs and came back and had a big red mark on his neck and said JJ scratched his neck. There was also, just before JJ died, Lori said it was hard for her to take care of him and be with Chad, that it was hard to do both. She also told people that her son, JJ, the 7-year-old, he had autism, that he had an evil spirit. She said he was being a zombie and knocked a picture of Jesus off the refrigerator. Lori told people she was going to ask Kay Woodcock, the grandmother, to take care of JJ, and if only she had done that. But Melanie then sees Alex Cox, the brother, carrying JJ upstairs on the 22nd, and she says that's the last time she saw him. She doesn't remember him being there on the 23rd, and that's roughly the time at which he disappears. There was also some sort of strange testimony, I thought, from Melanie Gibb about her boyfriend, David Webster, waking up from a dream the night that JJ disappears. And they wanted for Chad Daybell to give David a blessing so he could get over this dream, go back to sleep, calm down. And she knocked on Lori's door, but it was locked. And she tried texting Lori and texting Chad, but no one answered. Melanie then later would ask Alex Cox, what happened to JJ? And Alex said, you don't want to know. Now let's talk about what these beliefs meant for Tammy. According to Melanie Gibb, Lori said that about 2 weeks before she died, Tammy had become suspicious that Lori and Chad were having an affair. Tammy turned dark, coincidentally, in that same 2 weeks. Lori said that Chad couldn't just divorce Tammy because Chad would lose his exaltation. And then after she died, Lori said that Tammy had a dark entity in her, and Chad and Lori had to do what they could to get that spirit out of her. Melanie Gibb had some of the most important testimony for proving Lori's guilt and Lori's knowledge of what was happening. And that's that both Chad and Lori asked Melanie to lie to the police about where JJ was. If, of course, Lori had really thought someone else safe had JJ, there would have been no need to lie. That's the argument the prosecution is going to make. So now at this point, Melanie thinks JJ is with Kay Woodcock, the grandmother. But Chad calls and says, the police are looking for JJ. Don't talk to them. And Lori then asks Melanie, remember Lori told the police that JJ really wanted to see Frozen, and that she told the police that's where Melanie had taken him. So she said, just take some pictures of kids at Frozen and tell the police that JJ's in the picture. So Lori said, JJ's life is in danger. Kay is trying to kidnap him. Kay is dark. The police are dark. And so you need to help me protect JJ from all of these evildoers. Well, Melanie did lie at first, she said. And she said, JJ was with me, but Lori came and picked him up. That was false, she said. She said, I admit I told a falsehood. And eventually she did tell the police JJ was not with her. JJ was never with her. But she then did something that was really pivotal for the case. She called Chad and Lori and she recorded their conversation. And in the conversation, she says, I know, she says, why did you tell them JJ was with me? Why did you do that? That's not what a friend would do. And she says that, and Lori tells her, well, I know exactly where JJ is, and he's safe and he's happy. And if I can't tell you, Melanie, because if you knew, it will put you in danger. And she says, why would that put me in danger? Melanie wants to know, why would that make me in danger? What's wrong? What's the problem? And Lori just says, Lori passes it off. Melanie says, well, I feel weird about all these deaths that are happening. And Lori says, in the ultimate example of gaslighting, this sounds like you have been influenced by somebody dark and obey dark things. And now, according to both Melanie and Zulema, who ultimately was married to Alex, albeit for only 2 weeks, Alex Cox was a true believer. He really believed all of these things. This was not just fake. He wasn't just pretending. He believed that Charles and Tylee and JJ and Tammy were zombies. He believed that. There was also testimony, I want to throw this in because it becomes important later, about dark portals, that Lori had a dark portal in her closet and that Charles, Chad had one as well. It was either, she said, on his bed or in his room somewhere, and they could communicate through these dark portals. I don't know why they didn't just use their cell phones, but they used apparently these dark portals, according to her, to communicate with each other. Now, the next witness, Melanie Gibbs' testimony was extremely explosive. We had heard a good bit of that before because she testified at a hearing related to Chad Daybell, but much more detail this time. And then Zalima's was something we did not know about before, and I'll get to that. That she was the very last witness before we broke for the end of the week. So the next witness was the Chandler police detective, Nathan Duncan. He talked about, he had a lot of important facts. One was that in Arizona, when Alex shot Charles Vallow, Charles was shot twice. He said specifically that he had never seen a shooting death with so little blood. And Alex claimed to have given CPR. He said there's no possibility that someone is bleeding from a fresh wound and CPR was administered without blood going everywhere. That's just not even possible. One of the shots, he said, was shot at Charles while Charles was lying on the ground. He also played a strange call from Chad Daybell to a local funeral home the day after Charles Vallow was shot. Chad is trying to ask about the prices to get somebody cremated and then shipped from Arizona to Louisiana. But he does some strange things during it. First of all, he misspells his own name, the name Daybell. He gives an alternate spelling for it. He says he lives in Iowa instead of Idaho. And he says he's the nephew of this person who died and gives a name, John Myron Daybell. But he also talked about and played a recording of a blessing that Chad Daybell gave to Alex Cox just 2 weeks before Alex Cox died. And Alex Cox's death was not considered suspicious at the time, but certainly has a lot of strangeness around it. So according to the blessing, which the police found on Lori's iCloud account, it was a recording of it. Chad said that Alex could have gone on to exaltation, but accepted the Savior's invitation one more time to come to this mortal realm to condescend as a God. He also said, and this is what I think the prosecution will rely on the most, you have already assisted us in ways that can never be repaid. You will continue to do so as you move forward in this life. He talked about the body that has served you well will lay down one day and your spirit will leave this body. And of course, this is just 2 weeks before Alex dies alone in his bathroom of pulmonary clots, emboli. You will be greeted wholeheartedly and welcomed by the Savior himself. And he said, before the second coming appears, your body will rest a day or two, and much like himself, you will be resurrected. This witness also talked about a fake email from Charles Vallow to Chad that infuriated Charles Vallow. In the email, this fake email, it said to Chad, please come to Arizona. I'm Charles Vallow. Please come to Arizona. I'm willing to pay you well to help me get this book into shape as a ghostwriter. Chad was an author, and Charles Vallow in this email supposedly was asking Chad to come down to Arizona and help him write a book. He wanted to write his autobiography. But this email came not from Charles Vallow, who was really upset about it, but from an account that was linked to Lori Vallow. On July 1st, shortly before his death, Charles began threatening to go to Chad's wife, Tammy, and to expose the fact that he now believed Chad and Lori were having an affair. And that he, in fact, wrote to Tammy Daybell and said, your husband and my wife are having an affair, and I have proof. But there were no indications, according to this witness, that this was actually read. I wondered if maybe it was because it was summer and it was sent to her school email, so maybe she just never got it. But on July 11th, before anything more could happen, Charles Vallow was killed and shot by Alex Cox. He admitted that he shot. He just said it was in self-defense, and at the time was not prosecuted for that. The witness also talked about the text messages between Chad and Lori. Now, just 7 days after Charles died, Lori wrote to Chad, and this is the text message I mentioned earlier that I think shows she really did not know that the beneficiary had been changed on the life insurance policy. Lori said to Chad, I just got a letter from the insurance company that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to? Brandon or possibly Kay? And Chad said, wow, that's terrible. There's no way to find out. So, and I just wanted to throw this one quote in from Chad, from a text message Chad wrote, because I thought it was pretty interesting and telling. I thought you'd want to know about it. Chad said to Lori, I'm a grown-up version of Harry Potter who has to live with the Dudleys in his little space under the stairs. Every few weeks, I get to escape and have amazing adventures with my goddess lover, but then I have to return to my place under the stairs, feeling trapped. But I sense permanent freedom is coming. And now we're to the final witness of the week, and she's still on the stand. And her testimony was probably the most unusual and most unknown and important testimony thus far. She was married to Alex Cox only for 2 weeks before he died. She was close friends with Lori and with Melanie Gibb, and she went through some of Lori's beliefs, in addition to what Melanie had already talked about. Lori said that angels had visited her, including the angel Moroni. Lori said she had personally seen Jesus Christ. Lori and Chad taught, and this is super important, taught that after death, there is a 2-minute window when a demon or another demon, if there's already a demon in the body, can come in. To prevent another demon from coming in, you need to use water and fire to destroy the body. You can also bind the body or burn it. That is why it's so critical and is part of the testimony and part of the evidence that you had to hear that JJ was bound with duct tape, that Tylee's body was burned. That fits in with what their belief system was. Now, on cross, there was cross-examination, and Zulema said that burning is done verbally. During the casting, you verbally describe the burning. It's not physical, but that's not really believable as to what, given how specific what happened to JJ and what happened to Tylee was, that's really not believable in this situation. And I'm not saying that Zulema made that up. I'm saying that Zulema may have believed that, but it seems that there was a physical manifestation of that with JJ and with Tylee. That just appears to dovetail too closely with what they believe to be an accident. So she talked about Lori and Chad meeting, that Lori met Chad and was immediately flirty with him, even though they were both married to other people. That Chad told her they'd been married in another life. He was James the Lesser and Lori had been his wife, Elena. Chad gave Zulema a blessing and told her who she had been in prior lives. And in one life, she had been Lori's daughter. He also gave her some facts that I just had to wonder, would you want to know this? According to what he told her, when she had been in this earlier life as Lori's daughter, she had been raped and killed at age 14 and her body dismembered by Lamanites. And Lori had been killed too. I just thought, I think I'd rather not know that. If that happened in my prior life, I don't want to know that. But Lori, she also mentioned a fact that I thought was important, that Lori got former husband Joseph Ryan's $60,000 life insurance policy when he died. Now, I mentioned that because notice here in the chart, one of Lori's husbands who died, surprisingly, at an early age was Joe Ryan. There was no evidence. There was nobody believed at the time that anything had happened to him. Nobody suspected that Lori was part of a plot or part of something to kill him. But I thought it was telling that, according to Zulema, she actually got life insurance proceeds from Joseph Ryan when he died prematurely. Right now, as I understand it, he's been cremated and there's not much that can be done. He can't be exhumed and there can't be any testing of that. She talked about Charles Vallow and the evil spirit and a repeatedly changing story about Charles Vallow. She participated in a casting that was led by Lori to get an evil spirit out of Charles Vallow. And Lori then called Chad. There were several women. Lori called Chad and said, "Did it work?" And he said, "Yes, it worked." But later, Lori and Chad concluded that there was an even more powerful and skillful demon named Ned now in Charles. And they again did a casting, and Chad again said, "Yep, that worked." But then an even more powerful demon, and a demon expert, they said, named Hiplos, came in. They did several castings on Hiplos, which just didn't work. Now, Lori and Charles moved to Texas, and I thought this was interesting. She said the reason that Lori said that Charles had moved to Texas was because there were doctors to help people who were possessed by demons, and they could keep the bodies alive. So if you're from Texas, that's an option in your medical field. You may not even know that, but you may be able to find doctors who can do that. There were several castings on Hiplos that just didn't work, and they weren't able to cast Hiplos out. Now, on July 11th, of course, Charles died. He died because Alex admittedly shot him. He died on July 11th, 7/11, and Zulema said that that was Lori's number. It had long been Lori's number, and Lori said that the death was orchestrated by God, and Hiplos had been delivered to Alex and to Lori. Lori said she needed to cleanse the earth of evil spirits and was taking steps to usher in the second coming, and Charles's death was one of those steps. She also, Zulema, talked about Alex and the changing story, which I thought was significant. Now, initially, she said Chad and Lori said that Alex was a, quote, first creation. That meant it was his very first time on earth. He wasn't very experienced, and therefore they couldn't discuss certain things in front of him. But eventually that changed, and Chad and Lori said that Alex had been exalted in other creations and on earth multiple times and was a powerful spiritual being. Chad told Alex he was Lori's protector. And Alex, she said, was a true believer. He fully believed exactly what he was being told by Alex, by Lori, and by Chad. When Lori and Alex moved to Rexburg, she explained the reason behind their move. This was shortly before Tammy Daybell died and shortly before Lori and Chad got married. And Chad told Lori that other countries were going to invade the U.S. and that Rexburg, Idaho had been prepared as a place of safety. And that was why Lori needed to move to Rexburg specifically. Zulema had new information about specific people, the specific people who were murdered or involved. With Tylee, Lori told Zulema that Tylee had been possessed by a demon named Hillary. When Zulema visited in September and saw that Tylee wasn't there, Lori said that Tylee had to be freed and told her, don't ask about what that means. As to JJ, Lori told Zulema that JJ was being attacked by demons and they went into JJ's dog. So she sold JJ's dog after Charles died, which just really breaks my heart when you think about all that that kid endured. His father was killed, his sister was killed, his dog was taken and sold. Unbelievable. And Lori said specifically that JJ was going to have a short life. Chad said the same thing, Zulema said. And the reason was because he was going to come right back as Colby Ryan's child, as Lori's son's child. Lori had another older adult son named Colby Ryan. And so Chad said, yeah, he's going to come back as Colby Ryan's child. Through November and with Zulema, Lori was continuing to lie about where JJ was and told Zulema that JJ was with Kay as late as November of 2019. As for Tammy, Zulema said that Chad asked Zulema to lie and to send a text asking Chad to come speak at an event so Chad could break away from his wife and get together with Lori. Lori said that Tammy, Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, had been possessed by a demon named Viola and asked Zulema's help with the casting. During the casting, Lori suddenly received a phone call and was very angry, scary angry, she said, idiot, moron, idiot, can't do anything right by himself. Now, what the implication of this is that before Tammy Daybell actually died, a few days before, someone shot at her while she was in the driveway of her house. She thought at the time it was a paintball gun. She posted on Facebook, some jerk just shot at me with a paintball gun. What the heck? And the belief is that that was no accident. That was no paintball gun. That was Alex Cox attempting to kill Tammy Daybell. He missed. And so the implication is that this casting happened during that time, and Lori was upset because she had just heard that Alex had missed and that he had not been able to kill Tammy Daybell. Tammy still died within a few days of asphyxiation. Now, according to Zulema, Chad was going to actually move into Lori's apartment the day after Tammy's funeral. And she suggested maybe a little fast, you know, the day after your wife's funeral, moving in with another woman, maybe looks odd. She also talked about Alex and, of course, his death. On December 1st, this is after Chad and Lori are married, after Tammy has died. JJ and Tylee are still missing at this time. Their bodies haven't been found. Alex and Zulema married in Las Vegas. And on December 11th, Chad tells Alex that Tammy's body is being exhumed. This is Zulema asked Alex, well, why are you interested? I mean, did you have anything to do with Tammy's death? And Alex said, and here were her quotes, I think I'm being their fall guy, and either I am a man of God or I am not. The very next day, Alex died of pulmonary thromboemboli, which is blood clots in the lungs. This was a great quote from Zulema. She said, there are 2 children that have died and a mother of 5 who have died. I will consider that evil. Yes, sir. That was one of her answers. She is still on the stand. She will be on the first person up on Tuesday. There is no trial on Monday. The prosecutor, Lindsay Black, had a death in the family. So trial ended early one day, and there's not going to be trial at all on Monday to allow her to deal with that. We will be on all week this week, assuming there are no more catastrophes within the family, or it wasn't a catastrophe, but it was a big family emergency. So we're going to be on all week. At the conclusion of the trial, we'll go on at 7 p.m. We are going to have Lori Vallow back with us on Tuesday. She's going to be our special guest, and we'll be talking about Lori's reactions throughout the trial. Has she shown some body language? Has there been any sort of reaction from the jury to Lori? We're going to be asking her all those questions because she's sitting in the trial every day, so she can give us the absolute answers on that. So be sure to hit the subscribe button. Darn it, I forgot. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel because we're going to be covering this all week. This is the kind of case where it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So you really want to know all the nuances just in order to understand it. It has been an absolutely incredible week. I've never heard of a week at trial quite like this. It's absolutely remarkable. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications so you'll know when we go live, but I'll go ahead and tell you 7 p.m. So I am going to add our outro, which was done by our very own Lisa Michelle, and I will also link her YouTube page. She did a fantastic outro for us. So here you go.